Stop. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now. We have new stories every day. Now, let's go. My dad gave me some solid advice when I started dating. He said men of value don't accept disrespect, manipulation, or lies from women. Stay true to yourself and always be a man of value. It's something I've tried to live by. So there I was, talking to my wife. Abigail, there's been a change of plans. The merger meeting got moved up, and I have to leave tomorrow morning. I won't be back until late Sunday. I get how important this wedding is, especially since you're the maid of honor, but I just got promoted to CFO. Missing this meeting isn't an option for the company or for our future. I'm really sorry. She didn't take it well. Are you serious? We've been planning this for so long, and now you're canceling at the last minute. I'll have to go alone. Do you know how embarrassing that'll be for me? Can't someone else take your place? Abigail, this deal's worth over $2 billion, and I'm leading it. We've been working on it for the past year, and no one can step in for me. A lot of people's jobs depend on this deal going through. I know it's tough, and I'll make it up to you with the bonus from the deal. I understand why you're upset, but there's nothing I can do. I'll be back Sunday. She was furious. After that conversation, she stopped talking to me and told me to sleep in the guest room. No intimacy, no closeness before my trip. That was unlike her. This coldness, this anger. I tried to understand, but I couldn't calm her down. So I packed for my trip and spent the night in the guest room. I knew how important this wedding was to Abigail. Her friend Margaret had been through a lot. Margaret's ex-husband cheated on her during a serious illness, left her because he couldn't handle her slow recovery. It devastated Margaret, but after a miraculous recovery, she filed for divorce and battled depression for the next 5 years. Her friends and family were there for her, but nothing seemed to lift her spirits. Then, one day, she met a man at a grocery store. Just like that, her world brightened again. Her new fiancé, Brandon, adored her, and the wedding was a huge celebration of her comeback. Abigail had stood by Margaret's side through all of it, and now she was her maid of honor. I knew canceling at the last minute hurt her, but my hands were tied. I figured I'd just have to take the heat and make it up to her when I got back. The next morning, before leaving, I tried to give Abigail a goodbye kiss, but the bedroom door was locked. She didn't open it. I said I loved her and promised to call from Italy when I landed. With a heavy heart, I walked out to the waiting limo, feeling terrible about the situation. After 19 years of marriage, I thought Abigail would understand the predicament, but it didn't seem like that was happening. I called her before my flight, but it went to voicemail. I left another apology, hoping for a response. I sent a text before takeoff and another after landing, but nothing. I knew she was mad, and I would need to apologize a lot to get back in her good graces. With no other option, I called our twin daughters at college, Taylor and Sloan, and explained the situation. I asked them to check on their mom and make sure she was okay. They understood and reassured me that they'd keep an eye on her. They've always been Daddy's girls, and I cherished them for that. When I arrived in Italy, I checked into the hotel and got in touch with my CEO, only to hear some unexpected news. The meeting was canceled. The CEO of the other company had a family emergency, and they had to push things back. I immediately booked a direct flight to Philadelphia International Airport, which was only about 30 minutes from the wedding reception. The reception was set for 7 p.m., and I figured I could make it by 9. I hoped showing up would make things right with Abigail. After landing, I grabbed a rental car, and the GPS led me straight to the venue. I got there just after 9, and the place was buzzing. Music, dancing, drinks. Everyone was having a great time, and some folks were clearly having a bit too much fun. I felt relieved to be there, even though it had been a long day of travel. I grabbed a double bourbon from the bar and started looking for Abigail. It took a while to spot her among the crowd of over 200 people, As I sipped my drink and scanned the room, memories of our time together came flooding back. Abigail is 5 years older than me, and when we met, she'd just gone through a divorce. Her ex-husband, Dr. Edward Walker, had cheated on her with a nurse while doing his residency. That betrayal hit her hard, both emotionally and financially. She was a waitress at the time, working hard to make ends meet, and when I met her, despite everything she'd been through, I saw something special. We've been married for 19 years, and we've raised our twin daughters, Taylor and Sloane, with so much love. We've built a life together, and Abigail always appreciated how straightforward and loyal I've been in our relationship. We often talked about how important loyalty is, and I admired her for leaving her cheating ex. That resilience was something I deeply respected. Our marriage had been built on trust and commitment, and I thought it was rock solid. Then I spotted Abigail. She was sitting with Edward, her ex-husband. I knew he was friends with Margaret, but I hadn't expected him to be here, especially not without his wife. It took me by surprise. Feeling drained from the travel, I stood back for a moment, watching them. They looked pretty friendly, considering their history. Before I could move closer, Abigail stood up, took his hand, and led him to the dance floor. She looked incredible in her ivory dress, and I hoped this was just an innocent dance. But as they moved through several slow songs, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. Abigail had been drinking. I could tell from her flirty behavior. Normally, a few drinks made her more affectionate and playful with me, but seeing her like this, dancing with another man, especially her ex, was unsettling. Then came the moment that shattered me. She kissed him, right there in front of everyone. This act left me feeling both humiliated and furious. Watching Abigail share intimate moments with Edward and seeing him touch her inappropriately and exchange kisses put me in utter shock and anger. I got really mad, and just as I was about to step in and stop it, they moved back to the table off to the side and began kissing like they were on their honeymoon. I could clearly see his hands on her chest and her hand under the table. Right before I was going to confront them, it hit me. My marriage was done for. I remembered what my dad always said: respect yourself, son. Don't put up with being treated badly. So I decided to act, but I kept it cool. Sure, I could have caused a scene, ruined the perfect wedding, stopped them, and made sure it didn't go any further. But then I thought, if she's into him, she can have him. She's not mine anymore. Feeling oddly calm, I took out my phone, zoomed in, and snapped a bunch of close-up pictures and a short video. Then I texted her, "Guess what, sweetheart? My meeting got pushed, and I'm back early. Seems like you're in good hands tonight. I'll head back home, guessing you'll be staying the night with Dr. Edward Walker. Now I get why you've been ignoring my calls and texts. Have a blast, and cheers to our marriage ending. I'll be gone by the time you come back tomorrow." I pressed send and watched calmly, curious if she'd see the message. Sure enough, I saw her phone light up. She picked it up, looked down, and started pressing buttons, clearly checking for the text. Abigail sobered up fast. Her face turned serious the moment she read my message. As soon as I noticed her reaction, I left the party and headed to my car. I heard her yelling, "Michael, please wait." But I just gave her a cold look, shook my head, and got in my car. Before she could catch up, I drove off. My phone started blowing up with calls, but I was too upset to think about picking up. If she wanted to go back to her ex, that was fine by me. After seeing them together, we were definitely done. It had been 22 years since she left him, and now she runs back to him the first chance she gets. She's got some explaining to do to our family and the kids because this mess is on her. My phone kept filling up with desperate texts. "Michael, please come back. I need to explain. I love you. Please come back. Damn it, Michael. It's not what you think. I love you." But after 2 days of long flights, no calls or texts back from her, her cold attitude, and then seeing her with Edward, I wasn't interested in hearing her out. I was as mad as I could be and wanted nothing to do with her or her excuses. After ignoring 20 calls and texts, I finally stopped and sent one text back. Forget you. I'm doing great with my job. My kids are off to college, and everything's paid for. I'm free to do as I please. I still had enough youth left to start over. After driving for 4 hours of my 7-hour journey back to Louisville, I stopped at a diner to grab a meal and take a quick nap in the car before finishing my trip home. While enjoying my eggs and bacon, I decided to share my feelings with the world. Back then, Facebook was the go-to platform for updates on your life. Between bites, I changed my status from happily married to single and available, and uploaded 2 photos I'd taken of Abigail and Edward sharing a passionate kiss at the wedding. In the second photo, his hand was clearly on her chest. Below the photo, I wrote that Abigail was upgrading and reuniting with her ex-husband, while I was back on the dating scene. It may have been immature, but it was the truth. I was moving forward without her. The funny thing was, Edward was nearly 50, balding, overweight, and honestly not an upgrade in any way. It baffled me why she would ditch us for some old guy who'd already cheated on her. Maybe she preferred a doctor over an accountant. Honestly, it hurt. It hurt a lot. I felt more pain than I could ever remember. I was sad, angry, but also kind of amused. She was ending a 19-year marriage for an old guy who cheated on her over 20 years ago. Forget her and forget him. They're made for each other. I'm not the type to tolerate that kind of disrespect. Some might say it was just a kiss and some touching, not worth leading her over. Well, in my book, either my woman is committed to me or she's free to be with someone else. We all make our choices. After my late breakfast and a 2-hour nap in the car, I hit the road again. Pulling into my driveway at 7 a.m., when I turned on my phone, it started blowing up with notifications. So many came in that I thought they'd never stop. There were over 100 messages from her, her parents, her sister, and her friends. Within 5 minutes of turning on the phone, it started ringing, and it was Abigail. I wondered if she'd gotten any sleep last night, or if she spent it with Edward. No matter, I ignored her calls because I was past all that now, focused only on getting what I needed out of the house and moving on. I'd always got along well with her family, and when they called that morning, I took their call. I explained to her dad, James, what had happened. James, I had no idea she was unhappy with our marriage, but this was the breaking point. The disrespect she showed me in front of people we know is something I can't tolerate. It's clear she still has feelings for that man, so she can be with him. I plan to find a woman who will value what I bring to the table and remain faithful. I have no other option. I'll move out today and put the house up for sale. Tomorrow morning, I'll contact a lawyer to start the divorce process. She can stay here until the house sells, and I'll make sure everything is fair. Call me old-fashioned, but I won't live with someone who wants someone else. She made her choice, but I don't think it was a wise one. James arrived over an hour later, pleading with me to wait and talk to Abigail before taking drastic steps. But when he asked me to give her a chance to explain, I pointed to the photos again, showing how they openly fondled each other at the wedding. I couldn't tolerate that, especially with her actions. Her dad was disappointed in her actions and my quick decision-making. As I stepped into what used to be our home, I felt tears well up, realizing that our once happy home was now just a hollow shell of our marriage. Over the past 5 years, we had transformed our house into our dream home. Back then, mortgage rates were below 2.99%, and the house's value had doubled. Being the accountant, I refinanced the home at its full value, extracting nearly $500,000 in equity. I set up $200,000 trust funds for Taylor and Sloane's college education, with a bit extra to kickstart their lives. The remaining $100,000 was invested in upgrading the house, making it a place we loved. Thanks to the lower interest rate, the monthly payment only increased by $700 compared to before we withdrew the equity. It was an obvious choice, and Abigail had returned to work as a receptionist to cover the extra monthly cost. My salary was decent, nothing extravagant, but as the newly promoted CFO, I would be receiving stock options the following year, which would serve as our retirement fund. Abigail never took an interest in our finances as long as her needs were met. She trusted my financial expertise and enjoyed a comfortable life. I had tried to explain the stock options several times, but her lack of interest didn't bother me much. I looked forward to our future, happily. Now, with this merger and the end of my marriage coinciding, the bonus in stock options was promised at around 40,000 shares if the deal was successful. I needed to wait several years to exercise the stock options, but the anticipation of the shares hitting $100 each gave me a lot of confidence in the future. Since the merger had been delayed, the options wouldn't factor into the divorce settlement. I planned to file for irreconcilable differences and split our assets, which only amounted to about $50,000 in savings. We'd divide the proceeds from selling the house, but since it was heavily mortgaged, there wouldn't be much to divide. At 44, Abigail would leave with her car and about $25,000. If she had stayed faithful, she could have enjoyed a loving life and a secure future. But now my anger and humiliation overshadowed any affection or memories I had for her. All I wanted was closure and for her to understand the magnitude of what she had lost. I hadn't seen Edward in 20 years, and seeing him again brought back a flood of memories, both happy and sad. He used to be her husband, and they had a good relationship until he was unfaithful, which ended their marriage. They had been close, but from everything Abigail told me, he was never as special to her as I was. I, Michael, was her current husband, a more attractive man, a wonderful partner, and I had no doubt she truly loved me. Yet somehow, she had found herself with Edward, letting him hold her and kiss her, knowing full well it wasn't right. She kept flirting with him, though she knew she shouldn't. She had too much to drink, and was upset that I wasn't there with her. She should have stopped, but it felt good. Edward still seemed like her perfect match in some ways, and she thought a little harmless flirting wouldn't hurt. After all, he was single now, and I hadn't rearranged my plans to join her for this important wedding. She thought she deserved some enjoyment. When Edward kissed her again, she felt happy. His kisses reminded her of the old days, and while they danced closely in a private corner, she let herself believe that a bit of kissing and closeness was okay. Everyone else at the party was having a good time too. She planned to make things right with me later. Then came the text. Her phone buzzed, and she assumed it might be me checking on her. The message made her panic. I told her I was there, and she knew she was in trouble. She couldn't see me at first, but figured I was leaving. Abigail freaked out, realizing she had to explain herself before it was too late. In a rush of confusion, she made up an excuse to Edward about needing to use the ladies' room and hurried out of the wedding. Her heart pounded as she spotted the exit door swinging shut. She raced down the hall, her high heels clacking against the floor. When she saw me, Michael, she knew. I had seen her with Edward. She called out, begging me to wait, but I didn't respond. I got into my car and left without a word. She tried to follow, but it was too late. My car was already pulling away. Now she's sending me call after call, text after text, but I haven't responded. She's devastated, and she's right to be. She knows why I'm ignoring her. After sending another 10 messages, she finally got a response from me. Forget you. 2 of her friends found her later, kneeling outside in the cold, trying to piece together what had just happened. They were both shocked by what she had done and worried about the future of our marriage. They knew me well enough to understand that I wouldn't let this go easily. The next morning, back in Louisville at 10 a.m., I was packing my things. Sitting at the kitchen table, I savored one last cup of coffee in the house we had made into a home. I felt a mix of sadness and anger. When I finished, I left the empty cup in the sink and wrote a brief note for Abigail. In it, I instructed her not to call me and told her we'd talk once the divorce papers were ready. I didn't even sign it. I just left my wedding ring on top as a final gesture. Before leaving for the last time, I opened my laptop, divided our funds, and canceled our joint credit card after clearing the balance. From now on, she'd be responsible for herself. If she contested the divorce, she'd have to handle all the bills alone. There was no way she could manage the mortgage and utilities without my help. The house would sell quickly at the right price. It was in demand. If she agreed to the divorce, we could end this failed marriage swiftly, and she could return to her beloved Edward. I drove away from what was once my sanctuary and into an unfamiliar, dark new world. Later, I heard from friends at the wedding that Abigail had been devastated after I left. She couldn't stop crying and eventually passed out from drinking too much and crying herself to exhaustion. Her friends were worried and felt bad for her. They tried to reach me multiple times, leaving voicemails and texts, hoping I'd come back and stop her from ruining the wedding reception. They took her back to her hotel room, put her to bed, and checked on her several times throughout the night. When she woke up the next morning, reality hit her hard. She realized what had happened and immediately tried calling me, begging for forgiveness, asking me to call her back. But after witnessing her actions, I wanted nothing to do with her. I ignored every attempt she made to reach me. Sunday morning, I woke up with a terrible hangover and the looming fear of divorce hanging over me. I flew home at noon, and my dad picked me up from the airport. I later found out that Michael had called my dad earlier to let him know he couldn't pick me up himself. From the worried look on my dad's face, I must have looked terrible. My dad was my rock. So when I saw him, I ran to him, crying on his shoulder. "Daddy, I messed up, and I think Michael's left me." With a sorrowful expression, he gently comforted me. "I talked to him this morning, and it doesn't seem promising." "You know, Michael, what were you thinking, and with Edward?" "I don't know, Dad. I was drunk, mad at Michael for not coming to the wedding. I know I made a mistake, but he asked to forgive me. I didn't even sleep with him." "Sweetheart," he sighed. "From the pictures I saw, it might as well have been the same. I'm not sure Michael's the forgiving type, especially after seeing those photos. Being with another man like that, that's betrayal to him. When I got home, I hoped Michael would be waiting for me, but deep down, I knew he was long gone. I spent the day in tears, trying to call him, desperate to apologize. The irony hit me hard. I had made the same mistake with Edward that Michael had with me years ago. Michael, the man I truly loved, seemed to have disappeared overnight. My heart broke when I saw his wedding ring left on the table, along with a short note. Meanwhile, I had relocated to the company condo, meant for visiting clients. Since it wasn't booked, I informed my CEO about the situation, and he approved my stay there. My boss, Bill, who was also a good friend, went through a similar situation years ago. He even advised me to postpone receiving this year's stock options for better leverage in the divorce. The next day, I went to my office on the 16th floor, knowing full well that Abigail wouldn't be able to get past security to see me. I had already made it clear to the security team that if Abigail tried to visit, they should politely escort her out. They did their job well, and when she attempted to stop by on Monday, she quickly realized that she wouldn't be able to see or talk to me at work. Despite her efforts, I was determined to have no contact with her. She was left in the dark, not knowing where I was staying and unable to reach me by phone. Feeling isolated, regretful, and fearful about what lay ahead, she had no choice but to sit with the consequences. Amidst all this, my daughters, Taylor and Sloan, reached out to me in a panic, urging me to speak with their mother. I explained to them firmly but calmly that their mother had chosen to be with someone else, and to me, that act was a clear betrayal. I made it clear how seriously I take trust. Before they could argue, I emphasized that what their mother did amounted to breaking our trust. They understood my stance and respected my decision. I wanted them to see that their mother's choices had consequences and that our divorce was inevitable. However, I reassured them that I would always be there for them and that I wanted them to remain a part of my life. I also imparted a lesson, hoping they'd remember to always respect their future spouses and understand the gravity of betrayal, because many wouldn't tolerate such disrespect. After I shared a post on Facebook, a lot of unexpected things happened. Friends and family started calling, wanting to know what was going on. But something else happened too. I suddenly became very popular with women. I began going out with women who were younger than me, full of energy and excitement, something I hadn't experienced in years. The constant complaints and negativity from Abigail were replaced by exciting dates, affectionate text messages, and attention from women who were just looking to have a good time. A month after that post, I met Julia, who would later become my wife. We hit it off immediately and became a couple soon after my divorce with Abigail was official. Abigail wasn't happy when she found out about my new life. She was mostly mad at herself, but also jealous and upset that I didn't give her a second chance before moving on. I refused all her attempts to meet up, only dealing with her through our lawyers. Eventually, we sold the house. After paying the real estate agent and other costs, there wasn't much money left, less than $11,000 in equity. I decided Abigail should have that small amount. Her lawyers worked hard to get a share of my future earnings, but the court ruled that they couldn't base the settlement on what I might earn later. Instead, they used my average income to determine how much I should pay. Since Abigail had a job, paying alimony wouldn't be too hard. In the end, I agreed to give her $2,000 a month for 2 years. It wasn't a huge amount, but enough to help her get by until she could stand on her own again, or until she found someone else, which clearly wasn't going to be me. In the years that followed, Abigail and I never spoke directly, only through our lawyers. She moved to Milwaukee and joined a support group, eventually living with Dr. Edward Walker, with whom she had grown close. She wasn't the same happy person she had been with me. She realized too late the cost of her actions, driven by anger and selfishness. She knew what my reaction would be, but she still made the poor choice. While she hadn't been close with Edward that night, she acted as if our marriage didn't matter, as if she were single again. At our daughter's graduation 3 years later, Abigail met my new wife, Julia, who was 28 and pregnant, and our 1-year-old daughter, Eva. Abigail, now 47, looked much older, and Edward, who had come with her, hung back, sensing the situation. Later, Abigail managed to speak with me alone. She wanted to apologize, filled with regret for her actions, and for the life we could have continued to share. She acknowledged the mistake of risking our perfect life for nothing. I told Abigail that I had forgiven her. While I never expected to find her in someone else's arms, I thanked her for the good times we had, for our 2 wonderful daughters, and for the love we once shared. Her actions, as painful as they were, had led me to Julia and a new family, which helped me move past my anger. I advised her to focus on her future and assured her that our past was behind us. I wished her well and expressed hope that we could continue to see each other at family events. At that moment, Julia joined me, holding our daughter in her arms, and I introduced them to each other. The difference in their ages was obvious. Abigail, at 47, could easily have been mistaken for Julia's mother. This realization deepened Abigail's regret for the choices she made, the love of her life lost over a single night of anger and selfishness. Over the following decade, our paths crossed again at our daughters' weddings. Abigail remained unmarried, but continued her life with Edward, who was kind to her. However, seeing me with my new family and our young daughters stirred up old, fond memories for her. The happy life she once had with me was now just a memory, leaving her to live out her days filled with regret for the love and happiness she had lost. In a twist of fate, that summer, after cashing in my stock options, I bought back the old family home when it came back on the market. My entire family and friends, Abigail excluded, were thrilled that the house filled with so many of our memories was ours once again. My daughters especially enjoyed visiting, reminiscing about their childhood in that loving home. It's unfortunate that Abigail chose a different path. She would have cherished continuing the life we once envisioned together. Nonetheless, life moves forward, and I'm enjoying building a new life and creating new memories with Julia and our daughters. It's a lesson learned. Before you decide to wrong someone, be sure you'll never need them again. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.